In tonight's Dorchester segment, we get a last call for primary elections, some flashpoints of intolerance, and some waterfront views for college students. And to fill us in is the news editor of the Dorchester Reporter, Jennifer Smith. Thank you very much for being with us, Jennifer.
Of course, Chris.
The primaries, you got some local races, a county race. So what should people in Dorchester be focused on?
Yeah, people in Dorchester have a busy primary season to keep an eye out for the September 4th Democratic primary. And of course, it's Dorchester, it's in Boston. So the Democratic primaries almost certainly pick whoever it is that's going to be going forward, sometimes into the final seat in November. They won't even face any challengers from other parties. So on the Dorchester front, you've got the usual Suffolk County DA's race, which is a big, busy field, and everyone's very much keeping their eyes on that one. You have the gubernatorial and the lieutenant governor races. But really, when we're talking about local, state house races actually usually don't get all that much attention, but we do have some that are pretty competitive this time around. So one thing that we have is in the 12th Suffolk District, which covers Mattapan, Hyde Park, some of Dorchester. There was a rematch, actually, between incumbent Rep. Dan Cullinane and his challenger, Jovan Lissette. Now, Jovan is a Haitian-American who lives in Mattapan, and Dan Cullinane, obviously, is the sitting rep from Dorchester, who's been in there since Linda Dorsina Forey left for the Senate back in 2013. And this time around, Lissette seems like he's actually making more of a play for it. So for context, of course, in 2016, when he ran for it, he cleared about a little bit more than 30%.
I think it was almost 38%.
Almost 38%, exactly. And the incumbent, Dan Cullinane, barely cleared, I think it was 52 to 54. And there was actually a third person in the race that year who took about 11% of the vote. So it was a very close race for a first-time candidate in Lissette. And this time around, it's being treated as kind of a sleepy, slow race, actually, on the local side. The ward committees haven't endorsed. Some of them haven't even met to endorse. The civic calendar is kind of taking it off for the summer. So as we're going into this Democratic primary, you have an incumbent who should be really hitting the ground and getting his face out there if he wants to have a strong showing this year, and a challenger who it seems took a lot of cues from his last time around and seems to be a much more present figure in the community this time.
And of course, you have the other seat in the district that Evandro Carvalho is vacating, and you got a couple of front runners and a couple of other candidates with maybe a strange story behind them.
Yeah, so Evandro Carvalho, as you mentioned, he has decided not to run for re-election. He's actually in that previously mentioned Suffolk DA's race, that field. And so what he's left is a field of four who are vying for it. You have kind of perennial candidate Roy Owens. You have Brad Housey, who is an interesting character. He doesn't really have much of a footprint or a presence at all. He is a level 3 convicted sex offender.
And I checked that out. That's absolutely true.
It's absolutely true. And one thing that's been a little bit odd as I was going through elections data is he lists as his permanent residence a house that's actually associated with Roy Owens. So we're not totally clear what's going on there. But so those two are considered kind of the less likely candidates to move forward in the Democratic primary. What you're looking at for the two frontrunners is community activist Liz Miranda, who a lot of people might remember from the Black Panther challenge that she hosted, as far as getting students from minority neighborhoods to go out and see Black Panther. But she's a longtime Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative advocate, so she's very present on that side of things. And then you have Darren Howell, who is a community organizer, comes from more of a union background, very engaged in quarry reform since he actually had his quarry sealed. So these are pretty familiar faces to the neighborhood, and it looks like we're going to have a really strong contender come out of this primary.
I want to turn to some of these flashpoints of intolerance, and I'm not sure how much they reflect the neighborhood. There was one that was a viral video. The man, I guess he lost it. I mean, there's a woman on a motorcycle and another motorcyclist that come down his street, and what happens next?
Yeah, so there was an incident where there was an accident down in the Adams Street, Adams Village area of Dorchester, and 2 black motorcyclists pulled over to the side of the road when they came across it, and a white man, a Paul Sheehan, who's 54, from Dorchester, came out and just unleashed a racist tirade at them. And he is actually now, he'd been arrested before for disorderly conduct for the things that he was shouting, but has now been faced with additional charges, including civil rights violations. So he'll be going to court later on to actually address that, as well as the initial disturbance charge. But yeah, that really did, for a lot of people, strike a jarring tone, because that same week was actually when another 54-year-old resident of Dorchester, Chief William Gross, became the city's first black police commissioner. So as our editor Bill Forey put it, it really does seem like a tale of 2 Dorchesters there.
No, another interesting case is the Italian restaurant on Dorchester Ave. It has a rainbow flag out front. So what? I guess somebody made a big deal out of that.
Yeah, so Cafe Zia Gianna is one of the newest neighborhood staples, actually. It's down between Shawmut and Ashmont. It replaced the old Dot to Dot Cafe, and the owner, Nino Barblacci, is a gay man, and he moved here from Italy. He has just become an American citizen, actually. And there was a pretty shocking Yelp review for a lot of people in the neighborhood, which is a pretty progressive place, generally speaking. And the context is he had a little pride flag outside of his window, a very, very small rainbow flag. And someone who came into the restaurant posted a Yelp review, which did 2 things. One, it said that the people that lived and worked in that area and in that restaurant were not Italian enough, and also made a lot of derogatory comments about the pride flag. So it was a particularly ugly moment on Yelp. It seemed like an anomaly. The community rallied around him. Nino became an American citizen, said that, this restaurant was founded on the idea of food being something that brings people together. And he was kind of shocked, but hoped it was just kind of a one-off thing. But the story actually gained some national attention in the past few weeks since it occurred, and Nino told one of our reporters the other day that there has been a new stream of homophobic emails, new Yelp reviews, calls, and Yelp right now is in the process of cleaning that restaurant's page from people commenting not just negatively, but also supportively, which might mess with their algorithm. So yeah, we have these 2 instances of different types of intolerance here in the home neighborhood.
And this restaurant's not an outlier. I mean, there's been a pretty sizable LGBT population, within a half-mile radius for quite a while. There's nothing new.
In fact, one pretty well-known LGBTQ-friendly dance hall, nightclub, pub, the former Peggy O'Neill's, is going through a facelift right now to become even more excellent, and they're going by Blend.
Speaking of neighborhood change, waterfront housing, high-rises with a great view of the harbor, and this is for students. Describe this.
Yeah, I mean, it is the kind of view that anyone in the city would be lucky to get. You can see everything from Castle Island, the little shipping crates are visible out there, all the way to the EMK Institute and the JFK Library. And it is from the 12th floor of the new UMass Boston student dorms, which caused a lot of resentment in me as a relatively recent student. So these are 1,000+ bed residence halls, the first ever that the Boston campus has had. It's generally been a commuter school with its Dorchester campus. And they're beautiful. I got to do a walkthrough with them with the new interim chancellor, Catherine Newman, who said that the amount of investment, so this is about $140 million that's gone into these dorms and the dining facilities that are associated with them. She says that this really does indicate an increased willingness on the part of the UMass system, and specifically UMass Boston, to invest in its status as a pioneering nursing program, a really important staple of higher education in the Dorchester area and in Boston as a whole. And one big part, she says, to really kind of coming into their own is making sure that students who want to go there also now have the option as freshmen to stay on campus.
Now, I understand, these dorms can be a selling point to college students and a good thing for them educationally. On the other hand, what does this mean for the housing market in Dorchester? Maybe fewer of them will live in the neighborhood?
Yeah, well, Well, this is one thing that you and I had obviously talked about a while back when I was going through housing data, is UMass Boston, as the only major university right around Dorchester, has kind of a disproportionate impact on students who go out and live in the Harbor Point apartments nearby, or also just out onto the neighborhood in general. So this could either go one of two ways. Either more students who would otherwise be inclined to live in the neighborhood instead live in dorms, or what might be more likely, because this is geared toward freshmen, so it's not that they're being taken out of the housing market, but they might actually be more likely then to get used to living near their campus and then necessarily look for housing nearby. So what Newman says is she understands that there is now a new generation of students that's going to expect to live in the city where they go to school, and wants to instate a curriculum actually to help them with leases, dealing with landlords, apartment hunting. So it'll be interesting to see how closely they monitor where their students are going, because if they start spreading out into the neighborhood, it's pretty certain that neighbors will have something to say about that change.
On the other side of Morrissey Boulevard, I guess the footprint for new development is growing. What's happening?
Yeah, it's interesting. The term might not be land banking in this case, though the mayor's certainly thrown it around with some of the other major purchases in the Glover's Corner to Savin Hill area. But right next door to the Boston Globe site, you actually have a developer that's buying up a lot of land. As we know, the Boston Globe bidding process went badly twice and then was ultimately successful just last year with Nordblom buying it. But one of the unsuccessful bidders, Center Court Properties, which has offices in New York and in Boston, has actually bought up another few parcels right next door. So that looks like they're now in possession of the Star Market, the neighboring radio station, and the television station that was previously owned by Herb Chambers and proposed for a Jaguar dealership. So we'll see how that actually shakes out, but for now it looks like someone's planning a pretty big project on Morrissey.
Finally, there's a long read that we can tease a bit. A lot of people want to grow their own food, especially produce, but they need some help with that. So explain what goes on to help them.
Yeah, so one of our correspondents, Rowan Walrath, who now works for Mother Jones, dropped back into the neighborhood to do a really great long read about this urban forest, urban farming movement that's going on, with some of its roots in Dorchester, that aims to transform vacant lots into basically community hubs for gardening. And the movement is kind of picking up across the country, but you might start seeing a few of those empty lots near you suddenly transformed with a lot more greenery.
And finally, if people want to read that, read the rest of the reporter, or follow you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can read anything and find most of our articles at .news.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at .news, or me at jen.smith.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Of course. Thanks, Chris.
Jennifer Smith from the Dorchester Reporter.